There is a moment, if you have ever been truly alone, when you stop waiting to be found and start simply surviving. You stop hoping that someone will open a door and start learning to sleep against walls. You take only what you absolutely need, carefully, so no one notices, so no one has to make a decision about you. The elf in Thomas Vile's tool shed had reached that moment. She had been there 3 nights. She had taken 2 handfuls of his grain. She had wrapped her own wound with old linen and waited in the dark for either mercy or eviction, fully prepared for the latter. What she received was neither. What she received was something far more difficult to name, and far more difficult to forget. This is the story of what one ordinary man offered a stranger the world had already decided was someone else's problem. It is also the story of what it cost him, what it changed, and what it quietly built in its wake. By the end, you may find yourself wondering not about the elf or the farmer, but about the last time someone opened a door for you, and whether you have ever opened one for another. The fence post snapped before Thomas had pulled it halfway out of the ground, and the whole rotted section came down with a sound like a man falling. He stood there with the broken post in both hands, mud on his boots, staring at the 3 meters of split rail lying flat across the boundary between his south field and the old Brennan pasture. The Brennan pasture belonged to no one now, had for 2 years. But a fence that was down was an invitation, and invitations in this part of the valley tended to be accepted by things that had no business being invited. He dropped the post. He wiped his hands on his trousers. He looked at the darkening sky the way a man looks at something he cannot argue with, and then he went to get the spare lumber from the back of the tool shed. The tool shed door was latched from the outside, same as always. He lifted the wooden bar, swung it open, and there in the corner, between the hanging shovels and the crate of old seed bags, something moved. He took a step back without meaning to. The post hammer was in his right hand, and he brought it up by instinct. Not threat, just the way a man raises a lantern to see better, and the light from the open door fell across a face he had not expected. Not human, not entirely. She was sitting with her back in the corner and her knees drawn up, and she did not flinch from the light or from him. She looked at the hammer in his hand, with eyes the color of old pewter, steady and measuring, and she said nothing. Her ears came to fine points. Her hair was pale as stripped birch and matted with old mud. There was a gash along her left forearm, wrapped in what had once been a piece of linen and was now mostly rust-colored. "This is my shed," Thomas said. "I know," she said. He had expected denial. He had expected the frightened scrambling that comes with being caught somewhere you have no right to be. What he had not expected was that flat, tired acknowledgement, like she was confirming a fact neither of them found particularly interesting. "How long?" he said. She considered the question. 3 nights. He looked at the crate nearest to her. The lid had been moved and set back, but not perfectly. He looked at the old canvas he kept folded on the shelf. It was on the ground now, spread beneath her. "You ate my seed grain," he said. "2 handfuls," she said. "I was careful." He lowered the hammer. Not because he had decided anything, but because holding it raised was starting to feel foolish. "You're bleeding," he said. "Yes." He stood in the doorway for a long moment, the evening light behind him, the dark of the shed in front, the broken fence still lying in the field at his back, and he thought about how there was no good outcome here that didn't require something from him that he wasn't sure he had left. And then, before he had quite finished that thought, he made a decision. Not because it was safe, Not because it was convenient. He made it because he looked at her in that corner, at the careful economy of how she had taken only what she needed. And he recognized something he could not afford to turn away from. His name was Thomas Weil. He was 43 years old and looked older. He farmed 31 acres in the lower valley, mostly root vegetables and winter wheat, with 6 apple trees that had been his wife's idea and which he still tended with more care than he would admit. The farm was not prosperous. It was surviving, which he had long since decided was enough. He had come to that decision 4 years ago, when his daughter Mira was 6 years old, and died of a lung fever that came in autumn and did not leave until it had taken everything it wanted. The grief had not broken him in the dramatic way people seem to expect. It had instead settled into him like sediment into a riverbed, layer by layer, until it was simply part of the ground he stood on. He was a man who rose before dawn and worked until his hands stopped shaking, and he had been doing that for 4 years. His wife Petra had left the valley after Mira died. Not abandoned him, not in the cruel sense. She had simply been unable to stay inside the walls where the absence lived, and he had understood that without being able to follow her. She sent letters from her sister's house in the eastern provinces. He sent letters back. They were kind letters, the letters of 2 people who had loved each other and who no longer knew how to be in the same room. He farmed alone. He did not ask for help. He did not look for company. He looked at the elf in the corner of his tool shed, at the careful way she had borrowed the canvas and the minimal way she had eaten his grain, and he recognized in her bearing the posture of someone who had been managing alone for longer than they should have had to. "What happened to your arm?" he said. "A dog," she said. "In the village, when I came through." "Which village?" "Hartwell." Hartwell was 4 miles north. He had gone there last week to sell onions and buy salt. He knew the dogs there, 3 belonging to the miller, and he knew they were not friendly. "Come to the house," he said. She looked at him. "I'm not going to do anything to you," he said. "I have clean linen and hot water, and I intend to fix that fence before it gets fully dark. While I'm doing that, you can clean the wound properly, and I'll look at it after." She said nothing. "The grain was worth less than a bad infection," he said. "Come on." He turned and walked back toward the house, and he heard, after a moment, the sound of her rising and following him. Her name was Veilith. She told him this at the kitchen table while he cleaned the gash on her arm with salt water, and she sat without making a sound, which told him she either had a high tolerance for pain or was determined not to show weakness in front of a stranger. He suspected both. "Veilith," he repeated, to make sure he had it right. "Yes." "Thomas," he said, "this farm is mine. These are my tools. That's my grain. That's my canvas." "I know," she said again. "Good," he said. "Now we've established that." He wrapped the linen around her forearm and tied it off. "What are you doing in my shed instead of wherever you came from?" The pause was not dramatic. It was simply the pause of a person deciding how much truth to spend on a stranger. "I was expelled from the Ethan Vale," she said. He knew the word. Everyone in the valley knew it. Ethan Vale was the elven settlement on the ridge above the northern forest, a city of pale stone and old trees that most humans only ever saw from a distance. Elves from Ethan Vale sometimes came to the valley markets, occasionally sold medicines that worked better than anything a local healer could provide. But they kept themselves at a remove. They were not unfriendly exactly. They were simply elsewhere, even when standing next to you. "Expelled," he said. "For what?" Another pause. "For refusing an order," she said. He waited to see if there was more. There was not. "All right," he said. He set down the remaining strip of linen. He stood up, moved to the hearth, added a piece of wood to the low fire. The shed is cold at night, and that arm needs to stay clean. I have a back room. It was used for storage, but there's a cot and a small window. She was looking at him with that pewter gaze. "I'm not making you an offer out of sentiment," he said, because he needed her to understand that. "I'm short a laborer this season. My hired man broke his leg in the 3rd week of harvest, and I've been behind since. If you know how to work a farm and if you're willing, you can have the back room and meals in exchange for labor. If you don't know how to work a farm, I'll still let you stay a few days while that arm heals, and then we're done." She was quiet for a long moment. The fire popped. "I know how to work," she said. "We grew things in the Ethan Vale. Not this kind of growing, but I understand soil and root and season." "Then we have an arrangement," he said. "I'll show you the room." The back room was exactly what he had described. Boxes of old tools and jars and things he had meant to sort through for 3 years and hadn't, stacked along 2 walls. A narrow cot with a wool blanket that was old but clean. A window facing east that let in the morning light. He pulled a second blanket from the shelf and dropped it on the cot without comment. "The lamp is there," he said. "There's a latch on the door." "Thank you," she said. He went back to fix the fence. By the time he had finished, the stars were out, and when he came in and ate the cold bread and leftover stew that was his supper, the back room was quiet. She was still there in the morning. He rose before dawn as always, started the fire in the kitchen stove, boiled water for the grain porridge that had been his breakfast for 20 years. When he heard the latch from the back room, he did not react with surprise. He set out 2 bowls instead of 1. She appeared in the doorway with her hair pulled back and her arm wrapped, and that same careful expression she seemed to carry like a tool she had long since learned to use. "The goats," she said. "Are they to be let out or kept in?" "Let out," he said. "The east pasture gate is the one you want. Make sure the latch clicks twice." She nodded and went. He stood at the window and watched her cross the yard in the gray pre-dawn light, her movement precise and economical in the way of someone who did not waste effort, and he thought that whatever else she was not someone who needed to be shown things twice. The first week was a sequence of demonstrations and corrections that were mostly unnecessary. He showed her where the tools were kept and which ones he preferred for which tasks. She listened, asked 1 or 2 careful questions, and then did the work. She was fast and quiet and did not ask for acknowledgement. She weeded 2 rows of winter kale before he had finished checking the irrigation channel, and when he came back she was already 3 rows into the parsnip bed. "You don't have to do it all in one morning," he said. "I know," she said. She looked at him briefly with that measured gaze. "You're behind. The frost window is narrowing. If we don't get the root beds covered by end of the week, the cold will take the carrots." He could not argue with that. He went back to the irrigation channel. By the end of the 3rd day, he stopped giving her a morning list. He told her what needed to be done by week's end and let her decide the order. She also, without being asked, repaired the latch on the chicken coop that had been sticking for a month. A small piece of iron from the miscellaneous box, filed down until it fit. He noticed without comment. She did not mention it. The evenings were separate. She ate at the table with him because there was only the one table, but they did not speak much during meals, and when the eating was done, she went to the back room and he stayed by the fire. This suited him. He was not a man who needed to fill silence. On the 9th evening, she said, without prelude, "The carrot bed is done. All of it. I finished the coverage this afternoon while you were at the tree line." He looked up. I saw. It's good work. I want to fix the gate on the south field, she said. The one that lost its hinge pin. If you have iron stock, I can do it. There's a box on the left wall, the one with the red lid. Don't take the long bolts. Those are for the barn roof if it comes to that. She nodded. Vaelith, he said. She waited. You don't have to earn your keep every hour, he said. The arrangement is the arrangement. You don't have to prove more than that. She was quiet for a moment. The fire was low. I know that, she said finally. I'm not doing it for you. He considered that. He understood it perfectly. Fair enough, he said. He learned her in the way you learn someone when language is a second tool and work is the first one. He learned that she moved with more care around the goats than the chickens, which made sense once he noticed the goats would come to her and the chickens would not. He learned she did not eat meat, but ate eggs and grain and root vegetables without preference or complaint. He learned she woke earlier than him, which he had not thought possible, and that sometimes, before the sky had any color, he would hear her moving quietly in the kitchen. He learned on a cold afternoon in the third week, when the first real frost came and they spent 3 hours hauling the last of the squash into the root cellar, that her left arm was not healing as well as he would have liked. She was carrying a crate, and he saw the way she adjusted her grip, how she was not using her left hand fully. When they were done and standing in the root cellar doorway, he said, "Let me see the arm." "It's fine. You've been favoring it for 4 days." "It's nearly fine," she said, which was different. He looked at it. The skin around the wound had gone red in a way he didn't like. "Go inside. I have something in the cabinet." The something was a jar of drawing salve his old neighbor Breckin had given him years ago, made from rendered fat and several things Breckin refused to name, but which worked on infected cuts better than anything sold at the Hartwell market. He applied it and re-wrapped the arm, and she sat through it the same way she had sat through the first time, still and silent. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me. Tell me when something is wrong so I can deal with it before it gets worse. I don't need you losing a hand because you are being stubborn." A pause. The ghost of something in her expression that was not quite a smile, but was in the neighborhood of one. "I'll tell you," she said. He went back to the root cellar to finish stacking. When he came in an hour later, she had made grain porridge with dried apples stirred through it, a variation he had not made himself, but which was, he noticed, considerably better than his version. He did not comment. He ate 2 bowls. The arm healed cleanly over the following week. The frost settled in and the root beds held. He watched her sometimes, not from curiosity about her as a novelty, but from the same instinct that made him watch the sky or the soil. She worked like water works, finding the path of least resistance not out of laziness, but efficiency, moving around obstacles rather than through them whenever the outcome was the same. Patient in a way that seemed structural rather than cultivated, as if patience was simply what she was made of. He thought about this one evening while she was mending a piece of harness at the table by lamplight. The silence between them had the quality of settled things, and he thought, "She has been alone for longer than the 3 nights in my shed. Not lonely, necessarily. Alone. There is a difference." He knew that difference. He did not ask her about the Ethan veil. He had decided early it was not his to ask, the same way she had not asked about the second blanket or why there was a child's wooden horse still sitting on the shelf in the root cellar behind the turnip crates. People carry their losses in their own way. You do not demand to see the weight before you decide whether to help them carry it. But she told him, eventually, the way things surface when the ground has been still long enough. They were pulling dead growth from the apple trees in the weak afternoon light of a midwinter day, the kind of work that requires attention but not conversation. And she said without looking up, "The order I refused was to witness against my sister." He kept cutting. He did not turn to look at her. She had formed a bond with a human man, Vaelith said, kept it a secret for 3 years. When the elders found out, they put her before the council and required each member of the household to give testimony, condemning her choice. A pause. The snip of her shears. I refused. "What happened to your sister?" he said. "She was permitted to stay," she said, "because the others testified, because the record showed the household's loyalty. She stayed and I left." Another pause. She did not ask me to refuse. She would have preferred I hadn't. It would have been easier for her if I'd simply testified and remained. "But you didn't." "No." He thought about that for a while. He cleared what needed clearing and moved to the next tree. "Was that the right thing to do?" he said. Not pressing, just asking. "I don't know," she said. "It was the thing I was able to do." He understood that completely. He had stood at the edge of his daughter's grave on a grey autumn morning, 30 people around him, completely unable to weep, and had thought, "This is not because I don't feel it. This is because there is a limit to what I am able to do in front of others, and that limit has nothing to do with love." He had been ashamed of that for years. He was less ashamed of it now. "The Ethan Vale," he said. "Do you miss it?" She considered with care, the way she considered all questions. "I miss the trees," she said, "the ones that grow in the upper levels. There are trees there older than this valley, and they have a sound at night that I haven't heard anywhere else." "What kind of sound?" "Like water through stone," she said, "but dry, if that makes sense." "More or less," he said. They worked until the light went. When they came in, she made the fire, and he set the pot on, and they ate in their usual silence. But it was a different kind of silence than the first week. It had more room in it. It was 3 days after the apple tree pruning that she told him about the law. They were sitting at the table after the evening meal, and she had the look she sometimes wore when she was deciding how much to spend on a question. "There is something you should know," she said, "about what it means in our custom to offer shelter to an exile." He set down his cup. "In the Ethan Vale there is a tradition called the Vaithari," she said. "It is old, older than the city as it stands. When an elf is formally cast out by the council, they carry the mark of exile. Not a visible mark, a status. The tradition holds that any person, elf or otherwise, who offers genuine shelter to an exile without coercion and without demand of compensation becomes what is called a witness." "A witness," he said. "It means your name enters the exile's record," she said. "In Ethan Vale custom, if an exile is ever formally reviewed, if someone petitions the council to reconsider the expulsion, the testimony of a witness carries weight equal to that of an elder. Their account of the exile's conduct, their character, their honesty. It matters. It can change an outcome." He was quiet. Outside, the wind moved through the stripped apple trees. "You're telling me," he said, "that by letting you stay, I've become part of something I didn't know I was agreeing to." "Yes," she said. "I should have told you sooner. I did not, because at the time I was not certain you would let me stay if you knew, and I needed to stay. That was not honest, and I am telling you now." He looked at her across the table. The lamp between them threw a warm, unsteady light. She was looking back with that pewter gaze, and there was something in it he had not seen before. Not quite fear, but its near neighbor, the specific anxiety of a person who has done something they cannot take back and who is waiting to find out what it costs. "Does it put me in any danger?" he said. She was careful with her answer. "There is no physical danger. The Vaithari is a matter of record and custom, not of magic. But if the council ever investigated my whereabouts, which is unlikely but not impossible, your name would be known to them as someone who sheltered a formal exile. Some elves would consider that a mark against you. The ones who expelled you," he said. "Largely," she said. He stood up and moved to the fire, and added a piece of wood and stood there watching it catch. He thought about what it meant to have your name written into another person's story without being asked. He thought about whether it mattered. He turned around. "Is there anything I need to do?" he said, "for the witness status to be properly recorded?" She blinked. "No, it accrues from the act. It has already begun." "Then it's done," he said. "And I don't see that it changes anything here." He sat back down. "Will anyone come to the farm looking for you?" She shook her head. "The council does not pursue exiles. The Vaithari only becomes relevant if a review is sought." "And you would seek one?" "Someday." The question settled in the room. "I don't know," she said. "Perhaps. Not now." He nodded. He drank his tea. "Then for now we have a farm to get through winter." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said simply, "Yes." And that was all, but the way she said it was different from how she had said yes to other things. It had a quality of landing, of a word that had traveled a long distance to reach its place. He had been written into her story. She had trusted him enough to tell him so. That was not nothing. In fact, it was a great deal. The trouble began in the 4th week of the new year, which was to say it had been coming for a while before it arrived. Hartwell was the nearest market. He had been going there for years, knew the stall holders, and the transactions were routine. He had gone twice since Valith arrived without incident because he had gone alone, but in the 4th week she went with him because he needed a second pair of hands to carry the turnip crates, and her arm was well enough. He should have anticipated the reaction. He had simply decided not to think about it until he had to. The market was crowded for winter. She drew attention immediately. Not because she was causing anything, but because she existed, because she was clearly not human and was clearly with him, and because this was the kind of place where those two facts combined into a question people felt entitled to ask. The first person to ask was Danner, who sold dried meat from a stall near the entrance and who had never, in the 20 years Thomas had known him, been subtle about what he thought. "Thomas," Danner said, with a flatness that meant he was working up to something. "Danner," Thomas said, setting down the first crate. "That's one of the ridge folk," Danner said. "She works on my farm," Thomas said. "Ridge folk don't work farms." "This one does," Thomas said. He picked up the second crate. "She's helping me sell turnips. If you want turnips, come find me at stall 9. If you don't, we're done talking." He walked on before Danner could work out his next sentence. Valith walked beside him and said nothing. The selling went well enough. People bought the turnips. Some glanced at her. Some pointedly did not look. One small child pointed and asked its mother in a loud voice why that lady had pointed ears. The mother hushed the child and hurried away. Valith looked at the place the child had been with an expression Thomas could not read. The trouble had weight in it, though. He could feel it the way a farmer feels weather. The pressure change, the specific quality of silence in certain conversations. On the way out, Danner was talking to Holst the grain merchant, and Holst was watching them leave with the same particular flatness. 2 days later, Holst sent his son to the farm with a letter. Short and plain. Holst could no longer extend the grain credit he had been extending for 5 years. There had been complaints from other merchants about the company Thomas was keeping. Thomas read it twice. He set it on the table. He stood at the kitchen window and watched Valith in the east field, a small dark figure in the pale ground, working steadily. He thought about what it would cost him to send her away. Not in terms of the work, though that cost was real, but in terms of what kind of man that would make him. The one who had offered shelter and then withdrawn it when it became inconvenient. He had a clear idea of that man. It was not an idea he could live with. He put on his coat. He drove to Hartwell and found Holst at the grain merchant's. Holst spread his hands and said, "Thomas, I hope you understand it's nothing personal." "Tell me whose complaints," Thomas said. "I can't do that." "Then I'll assume it was Danner and 1 or 2 others, and you let them persuade you," Thomas said. "I've been buying grain on credit from you for 5 years. I've paid every account, every time." "This isn't about accounts," Holst said. "No," Thomas said. "It isn't." He stood in the middle of the floor with his coat on and his hands in his pockets. "The grain credit is 25 marks. I'll pay it in cash when the spring onions sell, but I won't be buying grain from you again after that." Holst blinked. "Thomas, be reasonable. There are concerns in the market about." "There are concerns about a woman doing farm labor on my property," Thomas said. "Those concerns are not mine to manage. My concern is that I have a worker who does the work she agreed to and does it well, and I will not pretend otherwise because Danner is uncomfortable." He left. He drove home. He sat in the cart for the last mile, deciding whether he had managed that well or poorly, and concluded it had been approximately honest, and that honest was what he had to offer. Violith was in the kitchen when he came in. Tea made, the table wiped down, sitting with her hands folded. She had seen him drive out and understood the general shape of what had happened. He sat down across from her, poured himself tea. "Holst withdrew my grain credit," he said. "I'll pay it off in spring. There's a grain merchant in Alwick, 7 miles further, but their prices are comparable, and I've bought from them before." "Thomas," she said. "Don't," he said. She stopped. "This is my farm," he said. "These are my accounts to manage. I decided what the arrangement was, and I'll stand by it. That's all." She looked at him for a long moment. He could see she understood she was not going to move him on this, and that she was deciding what to do with the feeling behind her expression, which was not gratitude exactly, but something older and more complicated than gratitude. "All right," she said. "Good," he said. He drank his tea. "The spring onions are going to need more seed than I thought. I'll get some from Alwick next time I go." "I noticed that too," she said. "The bed is deeper than you said. There's room for another half row at the south end." "I'll get enough for a half row then," he said. They drank their tea. The fire worked steadily in the hearth. Outside, the light was going, and the field lay covered and still, and the work they had done was holding against the cold. The market pressure did not go away. Danner was Danner and would remain so. 3 or 4 others in Hartwell made their discomfort visible in small ways. Unnecessary delays at their stalls, a pointed quality in conversations that ceased when he was near. It was not violence. It was the low-grade erosion of social ease, the kind of difficulty that wears at a person not through one large blow, but through 100 small ones. He noticed that Vaelith felt it. He could read her the way you learn to read familiar weather, the small adjustments in her posture, the way she found reasons to be in the back field when he went to market alone, the extra layer of stillness she carried in Hartwell. Not peace, but its performance. He said nothing about it. He did not know what to say that she did not already know. What he did instead was make the arrangement more solid. He wrote it down. He was not a man who did things for show, but he had a sense that she needed something she could hold, and so one evening he sat at the table with the pen and ink he used for accounting, and wrote out the terms plainly. That Vaelith, of no fixed previous address, was a working member of the Vielle farm for the season, to be compensated in room, meals, and a fair wage payable at season's end. That she had full rights to the property and its tools during this time. That this was his decision as owner and operator and was not subject to review by anyone else. He pushed it across the table to her. She read it. She read it again, more slowly. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I wanted it to be clear," he said. "To you, not to anyone else." She set the paper down. She looked at her hands for a moment, broad-palmed and calloused now from 2 months of farm work, the hands of someone who had taken on a different life and carried the marks of it. "May I keep this?" she said. "It's yours," he said. She folded it carefully and set it in the pocket of her coat, kept on the hook by the back door. She did not mention it again, but he saw her, once, take it out and unfold it and read it, standing alone in the kitchen before the light was full, then fold it and put it back. He turned away before she could see him looking. The thing with Brennan's old pasture happened in the 3rd month, and it was, in the end, the thing that shifted what the valley thought, or some part of it anyway. In early spring, a man named Gort came through looking to buy cheap land and had his eye on the Brennan pasture. He was the kind of man who arrived with plans already made, and part of his plan involved using the access track between his would-be pasture and Thomas's south field. Technically a shared access under an old verbal agreement between the Vielle and Brennan families, never formalized in writing. Thomas had told him the track was shared and he had no objection to reasonable use. Gort's interpretation of reasonable turned out to mean daily passage of a herd of cattle, which churned the soft spring ground and began compromising the south field's boundary drainage. Thomas raised this with Gort. Gort said the track was public access. Thomas said it was shared access, not public, and the distinction mattered. The argument might have gone on a long time. But Vaelith asked him, very simply, whether Alwick was the town with the county records office. He said yes, and why. She said she had some business there. He offered to drive her since he needed salt. She said she didn't want to trouble him. He got the card. The road to Alwick in early spring was the kind of road that reminded you why winter existed. Mud frozen and thawed so many times it had the texture of poorly made bread. The cart lurched through it with the rhythm of a thing doing its best. The horse, a bay mare named Pell who had opinions about mud and expressed them through her ears, managed with stoic disapproval. They did not talk much in the first miles. The early morning was grey and quiet. The valley spread out on either side with the pale green of new growth just beginning in the hedgerow. The ridgeline where the Ethanvale stood was visible to the north, a dark smear of old forest against the lighter sky. He did not look at it. She did. A mile further on, when the ridgeline had passed behind a hill, she said quietly, "The trees on the outer edge are the ones that took the most light. The inner ones are older, darker." "You can tell from here?" he said. "I know which ones they are," she said. He thought about what that was like, to see your home from a distance and not be able to return, to be close enough to identify the individual trees and far enough that the distance had become your permanent address. What was the city like? He said. Motion made questions easier. The road gave you somewhere to look that was not each other's face. She thought about it carefully, without rushing. Cold in the mornings, she said. Even in summer, the elevation, and full of sound in a way you don't expect. The buildings are stone, but the spaces between them are narrow, and the wind moves through in a particular way. In the early morning, it sounded like someone breathing, slow and steady. I used to wake to it. A pause. I don't hear it here. I hear other things, but not that. He drove for a moment without speaking. Mira used to wake me up, he said, without quite deciding to say it. Before she was sick, she'd stand in the doorway of our room and breathe loudly so we would know she was there without technically waking us. She thought that was very clever. Vailith looked at him. Was she? She said. Yes, he said. She was also extremely inconvenient. The corner of her mouth moved. They drove the last miles in a silence that was different from before. The kind that follows after two people have offered each other something and neither has made too much of it. What will you look for? He said, as Alwick's outer houses came into sight. The Brennan Land Charter, she said. If the track is private shared access and not public, it will be recorded there. Land charters in the county go back 140 years. Alwick keeps the originals. How do you know that? I asked the Alwick grain merchant's wife the last time we passed through, she said. She was knowledgeable about local history. I remembered it. He looked at her. She was looking at the road with the same expression she used for everything practical. Calm, considered, already 2 steps ahead. You've been planning this, he said. I've been thinking about it, she said, which was not quite a denial. He let Pell make her own way to the hitching post by the square. The records office was staffed by a clerk named Wesson, who had the particular patience of a man who had spent 40 years surrounded by documents and absorbed their steadiness. He found the Brennan Land Charter in the afternoon after a thorough and methodical search, made a clean copy of the relevant passage, charged a fair fee, and asked no questions. Vailith carried the copy out into the afternoon light and read it standing in the street. Thomas stood beside her and read it over her shoulder. It said, plainly and completely, that the track between the Vael and Brennan properties was a private shared access for agricultural use by both landholding families only, and that any third-party use required the written consent of both parties. She set it down and looked at him. He looked back. There was something between them in that moment that was not quite what words are made for. The recognition of someone who has been acting in your interest without requiring you to notice or be grateful, from a genuine understanding that the interest was worth protecting. You could have asked me to come from the start, he said. You were busy with the drainage work, she said. Vailith. You would have driven us here eventually, she said. I moved it forward. He took the copy. He folded it and put it in his coat. Come on, he said. I need salt and you need something hot. There's a good bakehouse 2 streets over. They sat with bread and hot cider and the afternoon light coming through the low window. She pulled the folded agreement from her coat pocket, the one he had written for her, and set it on the table beside the copy of the land charter. She smoothed both flat, looked at them together. 2 pieces of paper, 2 different kinds of record. One he had written for her. one she had found for him. He looked at them too. He thought, without saying it, that is a fair accounting of this winter. She folded them both and put them back. He took the copy to Gort the following morning. Gort read it and was unhappy about it, but could not argue with it, and the cattle passage was reduced to twice weekly at specified times on specified ground that did not compromise the drainage, and the south field held through spring. Word got around Hartwell in the way small valley stories do. Imperfectly, with embellishment, but the core was correct. The elf woman at the Vale farm had gone to the county records on her own, no one asking her, and found a 60-year-old document that solved a land dispute in her employer's favor. Dana remained Dana. But Holst, the next time Thomas came through, nodded to him with a slightly different quality in the nod. One of the stallholders, who had been notably frosty, asked in a casual way whether the Vale farm had the south field planted already, because his cousin wanted to buy root vegetables in summer. Thomas said yes. The south field was planted. He gave the man his cousin's name and moved on. He told Vaelith that evening. She listened and went back to sharpening the hoe blade she had been working on. He could not tell whether she was pleased or indifferent or something more complicated, but the line of her shoulders was slightly less tight than it had been for weeks, and he thought that was probably what relief looked like on her. The spring moved forward. The onions came up in strong rows. The carrots were excellent. The apple trees budded with more vigor than last year. The goats were healthy and the south field was intact, and when he stood at the edge of it in the early morning, he thought, "This farm is surviving. More than surviving. Better than it has been in 4 years." He knew why. He was not a man who avoided knowing things. One morning in late spring, she came in from the goats and said, without particular lead-up, "I've had a letter." He looked up from the account book. "From my sister," she said. He waited. "She writes that the elder who ordered the testimony has died," Vaelith said. "Fever last winter, and that the new elder is less interested in enforcing the old household law." A pause. "She writes that she is asking, carefully, whether the expulsion might be reviewed." Thomas sat with that for a moment. He was careful about his face. "That's good news," he said. "Maybe," she said. She set the letter on the table and looked at it. The Ethan Vale moves slowly on these things. It may be years. It may go nowhere. "But the door is open," he said. "A crack," she said. He nodded. He went back to the account book for a moment and then set the pen down. "If it goes well," he said. "If they review it and decide to let you return, would you go?" She was quiet for a long time. Not evasive quiet. Thinking quiet. "I don't know," she said finally. "I thought I would want nothing more than to go back. But I've been here for months, and I don't know what I'm going back to. I'm not the same person who left." "No," he said. "You wouldn't be. And the Ethan Vale would be the same," she said. "Mostly. It doesn't change quickly." "Would that be a problem?" She picked up the letter and folded it along its old creases. "I would miss this," she said simply. Not to him specifically. To the room, the window, the goats in the field beyond. To the work, to the ground. He understood that too, in the particular way of a man who had once thought leaving would be easier than staying, and who had stayed not from resignation but from something quieter and more stubborn. The understanding that the place you have made is part of what you are, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. "You don't have to decide anything now," he said. "No," she said. "I don't." She put the letter in her coat pocket next to the folded paper with the farm arrangement written on it. Both of them there together, the document of who she was here and the possibility of who she had been before. He went back to the accounts. The summer was a good one, the kind that rewards early work. The onions grew fat, the carrots were excellent, the apple trees produced more than they had in 5 years, and he was able to sell at the Alwick market as well as Hartwell, which made up for what he'd lost in Holst's grain credit and then some. He hired a young man from the valley for the heavy harvest work, and the young man was good with the goats and not particularly curious about Vailith, which Thomas appreciated. He thought, during the harvest, about Mira. He always did. But the thinking had a different quality this season, less like a wound and more like something he was learning to carry with both hands. Still heavy, less likely to cut. He had seen Vailith once, standing at the edge of the north field in the early morning when the light was horizontal and gold, absolutely still, not working. He had known without asking that she was doing something private with a grief he would not name, and he had turned and gone back inside and given her the silence to do it in. She had done the same for him, in the cumulative way of someone who had learned how another person needed to stand inside their own sorrow and had respected that without making it into a conversation. That was its own kind of kindness. He was not sure most people understood how rare it was. The harvest finished in the second week of autumn. He paid Vailith the wage written into their agreement, which she accepted without comment. She had been spending some of her small earnings on materials: a new hinge for the barn door, a good chisel, a length of rope for the goat pen considerably better than the one he'd been using for 3 years. He pointed this out one evening. The rope was necessary, she said. The old one was going to snap. You could have told me. I would have bought a new one. I was in the hardware stall at Alwick anyway, she said. The hinge and the chisel. She looked at him with the expression that was closest to a smile, without quite being one. The hinge was annoying me, and I needed the chisel for the work on the root cellar shelf. Vailith. Thomas. He let it go, because the root cellar shelf had been wobbling for a year, and it was now solid, and the barn door swung true, and the goat pen was secure. There was a logic to how she spent the small amount she had that was deeply familiar to him. You spend on what needs spending. You don't spend on what doesn't. And sometimes the things that need spending don't belong to you, but that you have taken some responsibility for, because that is what you do when a place has become, in some quiet and unannounced way, yours. The symbolic moment arrived the way most genuine moments do, quietly, without announcement, when no one was watching. The day after the harvest was settled, he found Vailith standing at the edge of the apple orchard, not working, not moving, just standing with her hand resting against the bark of the oldest tree, the one closest to the path, the one Petra had chosen first when they had planted them 10 years ago. He started to turn away. She was right about the drainage, Vailith said without moving. Whoever chose this position for the orchard, the slope here channels water away from the roots. It's why they've lasted. He did not ask who she meant. He knew. Petra had spent a whole afternoon measuring the slope with her heel, deciding where the trees would go. He had thought at the time she was being excessive. He had been wrong. She grew up on a farm in the north, he said. Her family grew pears. Vailith was quiet for a moment, her hand flat against the bark. The Ethan Vale has trees that are 800 years old, she said. We have tenders who speak to them. I always thought that was particular to us. I'm not sure anymore. He walked to where she was standing and stood beside her. He did not touch the tree. He just stood there, the way she was standing. "What do the tenders say?" he said, "when they speak to the old trees?" "I don't know," she said. "I was never trained as a tender, but they say the trees don't answer in words, they answer by continuing to grow." He looked at the tree, at the bark thickened in rings over the years, at the new growth at the ends of branches where the spring pruning had opened space for it. "Good enough," he said. He put his hand briefly on the bark, the way you would touch the shoulder of someone who needed to know you were there, and then took his hand away and went inside. She stayed a little while longer. He did not watch. But he thought, in the kitchen with the kettle on, that something had been sealed in the orchard. Not announced, not formalized. Simply present, the acknowledgement that this place had become part of her, and that the people who had loved it before her were not diminished by her love for it, but joined by it. That was its own kind of Vithare, not the kind written in any council's record, the kind written in bark and root and the patient memory of living things. He thought about what he had. He had a daughter who would never be older than 6, a wife who was elsewhere in a way that had become permanent without either of them having declared it, a farm he had kept alive through stubbornness and work, and, for the past several months, the help of someone he had met by accident in a tool shed on a dark evening. This is what a life is. Not what you planned. What happened, and what you made of what happened, and who was there while you were making it. He knew that on his daughter's birthday, a date in early autumn that he had never told anyone, he'd gone to the garden and stood at the edge of it for a while in the late afternoon, and that when he came back in, Vaelith had simply continued what she was doing at the table, mending the strap on the seed bag, and had not asked him anything, and that the dinner she made that evening had been the grains porridge with dried apple, the one she had learned he liked. She had not done this because she knew. He was almost certain she had not known. She had simply made a warm meal on a cold evening because that was a reasonable thing to do. Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes that is the whole thing. There is a version of kindness that announces itself, that wants to be seen and credited and gratefully acknowledged, and there is another version that simply arrives in the form of useful work and warm food and a door with a latch on the inside. The second kind is harder to make and easier to live with, and it asks nothing back, not because it expects nothing, but because the asking would change what it is. What Thomas had offered in the beginning was a corner of his home and the terms of a fair arrangement. The way you offer a tool. Here is what it is. Here is what it does. Here is what I need from it in return. He had not made a story of it, and what had happened in the space between the tool shed and the winter and the spring and the summer and the harvest was not a story either. It was not a dramatic arc with a turn and a lesson. It was something quieter and more durable. Two people who had each been carrying weight alone had found themselves carrying it in the same direction and had adjusted their pace without meaning to, and had arrived at a place that was simply further along than either of them would have gotten alone. In the Ethan Vale's old tradition, a witness was someone who could speak for an exile's conduct, who could say, "I saw this person in the in-between, and they were good." But the tradition had missed something. It only accounted for one direction. It had no word for the exile who, in return, had witnessed the witness, who had seen a lonely man in a failing farm and had chosen, quietly and without declaration, to treat his life as worth tending. There ought to be a word for that. Perhaps there will be, in time. The valley is still there. The farm is still there. The apple trees are older now, and the root beds have been expanded, and the south field has a proper drainage channel that will last 20 years. Whether Valith is still there, or whether she returned to the ridge, or whether she built something else in some other place entirely, is a question the story does not answer, because the story was never about arrival. It was about what happens in the in-between, in the space where a person is neither where they came from nor where they're going. That is where most of us live. That is where the real work gets done. If this story found you at a particular hour, if you're sitting somewhere right now with the specific weight of an in-between, then perhaps you know what it is to keep working when you do not know the outcome. Perhaps you know what it is to receive a small and genuine kindness and have it mean something disproportionate to its size. Perhaps you know what a latched door means to someone who has been sleeping on borrowed canvas. If you do, then you know this story already. If you don't, then remember it for when you will. There is one more thing worth saying, and it is small, and it is true. You don't have to do a large and visible thing to change someone's direction. Sometimes you only need to set out 2 bowls instead of 1. If this story stayed with you, it would mean a great deal if you gave it a like and shared it with someone who might need it today. And if you want more stories like this, quiet ones, unhurried ones, stories about ordinary people doing difficult and decent things, consider subscribing. There are more waiting, and if you are in your own in-between right now, leave a word in the comments. Just 1 word for where you are. You don't have to explain it. Someone else will recognize it.